Chen, Dr. Joey Mead, and Dr. Carol Barry, along with UMass Lowell students Mark Stern and Cassie Rubico. Cassie, that was a really interesting segment that you interviewed with Girls Incorporated.
Thank you, Bridget. They're doing some exciting things over there for girls at the young age in those areas.
Okay. Cassie, I think we'll start with you for the second segment.
Okay. Earlier we talked about the gender gap in the engineering field. What are some of the social factors that explain the gender gap? And are there initiatives in place to entice girls to enter into this field?
I think one of the social factors is something that you alluded to at the very beginning, which is the lack of role models. It's hard to imagine yourself as a fill in the blank, right, unless you see somebody who you can pattern yourself after. And I think that's one of the things, because there haven't been as many women in science and engineering, it's harder for girls to think of themselves as an engineer.
I would agree. I think sometimes you don't. And even for women looking for jobs, if you look at a job and you see that there are no women there, you would be a little less interested in going into that particular field or area.
Right.
Well, this is probably a good time to mention that in 2005, half of the department that graduated in the plastics engineering department were women, correct?
I think that's about right.
So
Yes.
I assume you, or I should say you women must feel like you're role models.
I think it helps a lot to have them, and we've always encouraged the women to participate and be part of the plastics engineering. And I think once you have critical mass, that tends to just perpetuate bringing more students in.
I'd like to ask you, actually, what were some of the obstacles that you faced, or some of your peers, you know, your women peers through college, when you first started, before you became nano princesses and nano queens? What were some of the challenges that, you know, women might possibly face today, or that you faced?
Well, I'll just
Dr.
start with
Chen.
one example. I mean, certainly it's still the case that you go to a technical conference, and if you look around, you do notice that there aren't that many women there. Now, that can be an advantage. For instance, in the bathroom line, it's often very short. So you don't have to wait. And it is also an advantage in that you do have an opportunity to stand out in a crowd, and that's
Right.
often useful in the technical field also. But there is a little bit of that. Every once in a while you do feel like you're a little bit isolated or a little bit in the spotlight when maybe you don't want to be. So
Right.
And I think there's sometimes a challenge. You know, I've interviewed for jobs, and people have been, you know, do you have any other source of income? Do you really need this job? You know, they don't seem to believe that you really want to work and that you need the job. So that still exists.
Okay. Dr. Barry?
And the other one I've had, which is because I'm a little bit older, is being asked the question after getting my bachelor's degree whether I could type.
Oh, no.
It's less common now, but you can still be asked, when do you plan to have children? Because perception of having children and the issues associated with motherhood and having children affect women. They also affect men, but they are both more importantly affecting women and causing people to have problems with that.
Mark?
Now, UMass Lowell has a chapter of the Society for Women Engineers. They've been doing a lot around campus the last couple of years. They've been really trying. They've started to give out awards this year, I know, because I know they've gone through the student newspaper to help advertise that. How do you think that society's helped the women of UMass Lowell, or how would it help? How do you think it's just helped the women in general, the community?
I'm the advisor for the student chapter, and basically that chapter was started as a networking group that basically helped women find jobs when women were not engineers. It's a little over 50 years old now. So it's evolved as women's roles have evolved, and so now some of the initiatives have looked at family life and how part-time work is perceived, how your presence at work, whether you can do work at home, how your boss perceives that work you do at home, because bosses like to see you, and that's a problem. And so that's they're being continuing to address issues that affect both women, but now more importantly, it's starting to incorporate both families, and because that's becoming a major issue. And I think that does make it's a nice group of people, and that's the only time I've ever had to fight for my spot. So, and that's this Boston's chapter section of the Society of Women Engineers is very large, and Lowell's section is very active. I've had some very good presidents.
Terrific. Cassie?
Did you want to elaborate
Oh.
on that? I didn't know if you. No.
Well, and I think it just helps to have more women and a support group and a network to talk to people. You know, I've sat in
Right.
meetings and all of a sudden just looked up and realized there'd be 30 people in the room and I'll be the only woman in the whole room. And it's a little disconcerting.
We spoke earlier about the graduates of the 2005 class, and they seem to be in the plastics engineering department. Is there a reason for that? Is there? You're laughing. Is
Well, it's a good point, because actually I'm in mechanical engineering, and I think that the enrollments of women in the undergraduate program are way too low. I mean, I would love to see many more women in the undergraduate program. We do great at the graduate level for some reason, but in the undergraduate program, typically in a class of 50, I might have 3 or 4 women, and that's, it shouldn't be that low.
So where do you think we need to focus some of our attention to pull more undergraduates and pull more women into the undergraduates? I mean, do you think it should begin at high school level or at middle school or grade school? I mean, and also, is there something that teachers and mentors could do to bring them along?
I think it should start probably just about as soon as you possibly can,
Yeah.
and just mention it and just bring women in who are engineers and just tell people that this field exists, because I think in the high school level, certainly the middle school level, you have absolutely no idea what engineers are or what they should do. Maybe we need a TV program on engineers. We have CSI, and that gets people interested in forensic science. So if you had some, engineering soap opera,
Right.
which I'm sure you could make,
Right.
then I think that might be helpful.
I do remember one incident where my daughter was in middle school and she wanted to participate in something. It was maybe a summer program with MIT in science, and she wasn't encouraged by her teacher. She was discouraged. They had only selected 2, so that kind of fell by the wayside. And I'm really disappointed, even though she, graduated with very high marks in cardiopulmonary sciences. She's very smart in that area, but she was discouraged in middle school from participating in the sciences. So there's just one example.
There's been a lot of research in this area about how girls and boys behave
Right.
and how they learn, and there's a difference in how women like to work in groups, which is actually really good in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be very, very advantageous. They tend not to put themselves forward because it's a societal value. And whereas men are more likely, or boys are more likely to raise their hand and be noticed, put themselves forward and get these positions. And that works well for them in the business community. If you go to other societies, for example in Turkey, there's 60% of the chemical engineers are women.
That's
Women
astounding.
engineering students. So it's because the reforms have encouraged education on both genders, and that's been since they reformed it after World War I. They're starting to reap that reward. It's taken a while, but it is now more uniform. And there's other societies that like the Eastern Bloc, former Eastern Bloc countries, that have the same ratios. So what we get in the United States, it also reflects our cultural norms.
Oh, I see.
What we expect of women or expect of boys, women, men and women in general.
Mark?
Just a question. The area we're in, the Merrimack Valley and the surrounding areas, is largely known as a big technological area. Burlington area, now that's known as the Silicon Valley of the East Coast. Do you feel that our innovations in technology in this area really helps bring people to UMass Lowell, and therefore helps you guys really start building a better program?
I think that it will, and part of our participation in the manufacturing area is to encourage and get more jobs in the community by developing the